He had been living on the same pier for 20 years. Nobody even knew his name. They called him Harbor Ghost. But this morning, when Thomas Mitchell saw the young Navy SEAL struggling in the water, his body remembered that old muscle memory and sprang into action. His entry into the water was perfect. His breath-holding technique was extraordinary. And when he rescued the SEAL, the young soldier's first words were shocking. Are you a real frogman? From which city around the world are you watching today? If this story moves you, please subscribe to Rising Life Stories to help us share more hidden heroism stories. Thomas Mitchell woke up on the concrete platform just below Pier 39, beside the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. He was 62 years old, with long, messy hair and a beard that was turning from gray to white. He had been living in the same place for 20 years, and everyone knew him as Harbor Ghost. His morning routine was always the same. Wash his face with cold water from the bay, pack up his makeshift bedding made from cardboard pieces, check the trash cans for the day's first meal. Tourists would see him but ignore him. Locals were used to his presence as if he were part of the building. Security guard Rodriguez, who worked at Pier 39, had known Thomas for years. He's harmless, he'd tell other guards. Doesn't cause trouble, just lives there. Sometimes talks to sailors, seems to know about seamanship. Indeed, Thomas's knowledge of the sea was remarkable. He knew tide schedules by heart, could predict weather from the sound of the wind, would tell fishermen which areas to find catches. But nobody took these seriously. They were just the experiences of a homeless man. In Thomas's bag were a few old photographs, a faded ID card, and strange metal pieces. Sometimes he would look at these photos and think, but never shared them with anyone. His past seemed very distant, like memories from another life. Some locals had tried to help him over the years, shelter suggestions, job opportunities, social service programs, but Thomas would politely refuse them all. "I'm fine here," he'd say. "The sea calms me." Indeed, Thomas had a special connection with water. Every morning, no matter what the weather, he would sit by the edge of the bay and watch the waves. Sometimes he would touch the water with his hands, as if greeting an old friend. This morning there was unusual activity at Pier 39. A San Francisco-based Navy SEAL team was going to conduct underwater training in the bay. 5 young soldiers had come to the pier fully equipped. Team leader Petty Officer Jake Morrison was 28 years old, an experienced SEAL with 3 tours in Afghanistan. The 4 soldiers beside him were new graduates, young men with no real mission experience yet. "Today, we're going to do free diving training," Morrison said. "We'll go down to 50 feet depth, test your breath-holding times. This bay is cold and has strong currents. Be careful." Thomas sat in his usual spot, watching the training. He was following the SEAL's preparation phase with curiosity, his eyes noting every detail like an experienced observer. One of the young SEALs, Seaman Marcus Torres, was 22 years old and had only been with the team for 6 months. He appeared more eager but less experienced than the others. Pre-training nervousness was readable on his face. "Torres, relax," Morrison said. "This is routine training. Don't try to push your limits. Keep safety first." But Marcus was driven by a desire to prove himself. While other SEALs could hold their breath for 3 to 4 minutes, he wanted to do more. The first divers entered the water. Morrison and 2 experienced soldiers went down to 50 feet depth to start the training. Their underwater time was within normal limits, about 2 to 3 minutes. When Marcus's turn came, Thomas had noticed his nervousness. The young soldier's breathing technique wasn't right. Muscle tension was excessive. This kid is going to push himself too hard, Thomas thought, but didn't tell anyone. Nobody would value his opinion anyway. When Marcus Torres entered the water, his adrenaline level was very high. He decided to go much deeper than normal to prove the skill he wanted to show other soldiers. When he reached 50 feet, he didn't stop. 60, 70, 80 feet. He was also trying to push his breath-holding time beyond the limit, but something started to go wrong at the bottom of the sea. Panic, sudden and uncontrolled. Marcus's lungs started burning, but he was caught between the desire to surface and the urge to try to stay longer. This indecision was deadly. He lost his breath. Underwater fainting. Shallow water blackout, Free diving's biggest danger. On the surface, Morrison had noticed that Marcus had been underwater too long. "Torres, come up!" But Marcus wasn't responding. Morrison gave the alarm. "Man down. Emergency rescue." Other SEALs sprang into action, but finding and retrieving an unconscious man at 80 feet depth was a difficult operation even for experienced divers. Thomas sat on the pier watching the events. He saw the SEALs panic, the rescue team jumping into the water, but Marcus still couldn't be found. At that moment, something that had been sleeping for 20 years awakened inside Thomas. Muscle memory, reflex, old training. Thomas stood up without thinking. Thomas's movement was so fast and fluid that observers were shocked. His dive from the pier into the water was a professional diver's dive. Perfect body position, water entry with a technique that made almost no sound. Morrison and other SEALs watched this homeless man's water entry in amazement. "What is this guy doing?" one of the SEALs shouted. But Thomas's underwater performance was even more surprising. He descended to 80 feet depth without any strain. His breath-holding capacity surpassed even experienced SEALs. When Thomas found Marcus, his rescue technique was textbook perfect. The way he grasped the unconscious diver, his position for bringing him to the surface, everything was the result of military training. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. In this time, Thomas had descended to 80 feet depth, found Marcus, and brought him to the surface. This performance was at a level that even elite divers would admire. When he brought Marcus to the pier, Thomas immediately began applying CPR. His technique was perfect. Timing was flawless. 2 minutes later, Marcus started coughing and regained consciousness. Morrison and his team couldn't believe what they were watching during this rescue operation. This homeless man had just completed an operation that experienced SEALs couldn't do alone and in 3 minutes. When Marcus opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Thomas's face. Old, weathered, but with unmistakable experience in his eyes. Who are you?" Marcus asked, breathless. Thomas looked into Marcus's eyes. After 20 years, it was no longer possible to hide his identity. "Thomas Mitchell," he said calmly. "UDT 12, 1971 to 1985. Morrison's blood froze. UDT 12, Underwater Demolition Team 12, Vietnam's most legendary unit." "Impossible," Morrison whispered. "UDT 12, that unit was legendary status in Vietnam." Thomas, while positioning Marcus to breathe better, said, "Legends emerge after they die." "I'm still alive." Other SEALs had gathered around. They were trying to understand who this man really was. Morrison, as an experienced soldier, knew UDT history. UDT 12 took on the most dangerous missions in Vietnam: underwater demolition, harbor clearance, riverine operations, and rescue operations, Thomas added. "Like I did today." Marcus was still in shock. "Sir, are you a real frogman?" The light of old days appeared in Thomas's eyes. Frogman, the nickname UDT operators proudly carried, the precursors of SEALs. "Once a frogman, always a frogman," Thomas said. "But that was a very long time ago." Morrison couldn't hide his curiosity. "Sir, what rank did you serve at in UDT 12? Thomas hesitated. He had to share a truth he hadn't told anyone for 20 years. "Chief Petty Officer Thomas Mitchell, Dive Master, 127 combat missions, Vietnam and Cambodia." This information had a shocking effect among the SEALs. Chief Petty Officer was the highest rank of non-commissioned officers. 127 combat missions was an incredible number. "Sir," Morrison said, automatically switching to a respectful tone. "What happened?" Thomas looked at the waters of the bay. "Long story, soldier, and most of it is classified. But after saving Marcus's life, Thomas could no longer close himself off completely. Stories he hadn't told anyone for years were pouring out of him. I started in UDT 12 in 1971. I was 19 years old, young and eager just like you. In Vietnam, we did underwater demolition operations. We cleared enemy harbors, disarmed booby traps." The SEALs listened with fascination. This period was the most dangerous era of military diving. My hardest mission was in 1974, Thomas continued. In the Mekong Delta, we were clearing an enemy underwater minefield. I stayed underwater for 12 hours, disarmed 47 mines. Morrison was impressed. 47 mines in a single mission? It was a record at the time, but the cost was heavy. There was sadness in Thomas's voice. I lost 2 of my men on that mission. I couldn't anticipate the booby trap. The explosion nearly killed me too. Marcus asked curiously. What happened afterward? I received treatment in the hospital for 8 months, multiple shrapnel wounds, partial hearing loss, and Thomas had paused. PTSD. We didn't know this term back then. The SEALs responded to this confession with respectful silence. They knew the devastating effects of PTSD on military personnel. I was medically retired in 1985, Thomas continued. I couldn't adapt to civilian life. Everything seemed too quiet, too safe. So how did you end up here? Morrison asked. Thomas pointed to Pier 39. The water was calling me. This bay reminds me of the rivers in Vietnam. I found peace here. It's been 20 years. When Marcus was able to stand up, he turned to Thomas. Sir, you saved my life. How can I thank you? Thomas smiled faintly. Thanks are unnecessary, soldier. This is our tradition. Underwater brotherhood. Morrison stepped forward. Sir, this might be an inappropriate request, but would you come with us? We can offer you proper treatment at the base. Thomas shook his head. I appreciate it, but I belong here. At least a proper medical checkup, Morrison insisted. You just displayed extraordinary physical performance. Old training never disappears completely, Thomas said, but the body ages. Marcus looked determined. Sir, I owe you my life. Isn't there anything I can do? Thomas looked at the young SEAL's sincere expression. Actually, there is something. Anything, sir. Respect the water. This was the most important lesson I learned in Vietnam. Water can be both friend and enemy. Treat it with respect and it will respect you. This advice deeply affected even experienced SEAL Morrison. This was simple but profound wisdom. And, Thomas added, never dive alone when unnecessary. Teamwork saves lives. The SEALs took this lesson to heart. They had just experienced exactly this. In the following days, Thomas's story began to spread in the local military community. Navy SEALs reported the incident. Confirmation came from UDT veteran groups. Morrison had done research to verify Thomas's military record. He had found Chief Petty Officer Thomas Mitchell's service record in Pentagon archives. An impressive career. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Navy Achievement Medal. Sir is a real war hero, Morrison told Marcus, and he's been living on the streets for 20 years. Marcus felt deeply troubled by this situation. How can a hero become homeless? Morrison explained, PTSD, addiction, economic problems. Military transition to civilian life isn't always easy, especially for combat veterans. Local veteran organizations began reaching out to Thomas. They offered housing assistance, medical care, job opportunities, but Thomas politely declined them all. Appreciated, but I've adapted to this life, he would say. Change is too difficult right now. Marcus, however, was persistent. He visited Thomas every day, having conversations. Gradually, Thomas began to open up. Why don't you accept help? Marcus asked one day. After a long silence, Thomas answered, because I feel guilty. My brothers died in Vietnam. I stayed alive here. I feel like I don't deserve a comfortable life. This confession of survivor's guilt deeply moved Marcus. Sir, they wouldn't want you to suffer. Honor their memory by living well. With Marcus's persistent efforts and the local community's support, Thomas gradually began to accept help. The first step was small, regular medical checkup. At the doctor's appointment, Thomas's physical condition came out surprisingly good. Years of waterside living, daily swimming, and natural fitness routine had kept him healthy. Remarkable for 62 years old, the doctor said. Clear signs of extensive physical training background. Mental health evaluation was more complex. Decades of untreated PTSD, social isolation, and survivor's guilt, but also strong resilience and coping mechanisms. The therapist recommended gradual reintegration into society. Start small. Maybe share your expertise. An idea emerged. Thomas could work as a part-time instructor at a local dive shop. His experience was extraordinary. His certifications were still valid. Marcus enthusiastically supported this plan. "Sir, imagine how many young divers you could teach life-saving skills." Thomas was initially hesitant. "It's been a long time since I worked with civilians." "But skill never leaves," Marcus said. "You just proved it." The shop owner was a veteran-owned business, and when he learned about Thomas's background, he immediately hired him. Honor to have a real UDT legend on the team. Thomas was nervous on his first day, but interaction with students came naturally. Underwater safety, rescue techniques, breathing methods, everything was second nature. "This instructor is incredible," one of the students said. "Such detailed knowledge, real experience." As months passed, Thomas's life improved dramatically. He still lived in the Pier 39 vicinity, but in proper housing. His income was stable, social connections were developing. Marcus regularly visited, and an almost mentor-student relationship had developed. Thomas taught the young SEAL advanced diving techniques, while Marcus taught Thomas about modern military technology. "Sir, this technique isn't in SEAL training," Marcus said while learning Thomas's underwater navigation method. "Old school is sometimes better," Thomas replied. "Technology fails, skills never do." The local Navy community began to embrace Thomas. He was invited to veteran reunions, honored at military ceremonies. But the most meaningful moment for Thomas was when other veterans began approaching him for help. "Heard you made a successful transition," one of the homeless veterans said. "Any advice?" Thomas realized that his experience was valuable not just for diving, but for life transition too. "Start with accepting help," he advised. "Pride is sometimes the enemy of progress." A community service organization recruited Thomas for a veterans outreach program. Peer counseling, transition assistance, practical advice, all based on his own experience. "Full circle," Morrison said, seeing Thomas's community work, from rescued to rescuer again. And so, a man who lived invisibly by the bay for 20 years completely changed both his own life and others' perspectives with a single heroic act. Thomas Mitchell transformed from harbor ghost to hero, from hero to mentor. Because real heroism never dies. Sometimes it lies dormant, but it resurfaces at critical moments. And sometimes the most extraordinary capabilities are found in the most unexpected people. Have you ever thought about it? How many of the people you see on the streets have remarkable pasts? Hidden military service, extraordinary skills, untold stories of sacrifice. At Rising Life Stories, we bring these invisible heroes into the spotlight because everyone deserves to be seen, respected, and remembered. From which city are you watching today? Let us know in the comments, and if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, because we'll tell many more hidden hero stories.